You are listening to HOA Citation Circus. This is the pettiest parking war ever. I crouched by my bumper, trying to make sense of what was happening, when I heard the shutter click. I looked up and there she was, Carol Walker, Design Review Board Vice Chair, phone aimed at my vehicle identification number like she was documenting a crime scene. She saw me notice and her face twisted into something between triumph and rage. "I am watching you," she said, not even trying to hide the threat in her voice. She took another photo, then another, zooming in on the registration sticker, the inspection decal, the plate frame. I straightened up, hands open, trying to signal I was not looking for a fight. "What are you doing?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. She did not even blink. "Mismatched paperwork means tow on site," she said, like she was reading from a script she had memorized. "Your registration does not match your lease addendum, and that is a violation of Section 12.4. I had no idea what Section 12.4 was. I had lived in the villas at Lakeview Community Association in Newark, Delaware for 8 months, and I had never heard of a lease addendum requirement tied to parking. I work as a mailroom supervisor at a corporate office and I hate chaos, so I keep my paperwork tight. Everything was current. Everything matched. But Carol did not care. She kept snapping photos, circling my car like a predator, her flashlight clicking on even though it was mid-morning and the light was fine. "If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive," she said, her voice dripping with smug authority. I felt my jaw tighten. I had been late to work twice in the past month because of traffic, and my employer was watching my attendance. One more late arrival would end my probation, and I could not afford that. But right now, standing in the guest parking lot with Carol treating me like a criminal, I knew this was going to be a problem that did not go away quietly. Carol stood up, brushing imaginary dirt off her blazer. "The board will back me because they are afraid of me," she said, her tone casual, like she was commenting on the weather. She turned and walked toward the management office, her bucket hat bobbing with each step, the red fabric almost glowing against the gray sky. I watched her go, my hands still clenched. I did not know it then, but that line, that casual declaration of power, was going to come back to haunt her. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of my own car, the registration sticker clear in the frame, the inspection current, everything legal. Then I took a photo of the parking space number stenciled on the curb. No fire lane. No restricted zone. Just a regular guest spot in a neighborhood where curb appeal mattered more than reality. I got in my car and drove to work, my mind already spinning through what I needed to do. I could not let this slide. Carol had just declared war and I was not about to lose. The next morning, I found a violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. It was printed on official Villas at Lakeview letterhead, dated the day before, claiming I had parked overnight in a guest-only zone and that guest parking was limited to 4 hours between 8 in the morning and 10 at night. I read it twice. The notice referenced a new rule about decals or permits that appeared the day after I complained to the management company about Carol harassing me in the parking lot. I had never seen this rule before. I had checked the community rules when I moved in and there was no mention of guest parking time limits or mandatory decals. I called the management office and got voicemail. I left a message asking for clarification and a copy of the updated rules. Then I drove to work, the notice sitting on my passenger seat like a ticking bomb. My employer had already flagged my attendance and I was not about to give them a reason to let me go. I made it on time, barely, and spent the morning sorting priority mail and trying not to think about Carol and her smug face. But by lunch, I got a text from a neighbor. "You need to see this," it said, with a screenshot attached. The screenshot showed a group chat for the Villas at Lakeview Community Association, and in it, Carol had posted a message announcing that all guest parking would now require a permit obtainable from the management office during business hours only, and that any vehicle without a permit would be subject to immediate towing at the owner's expense. The message was timestamped 10 at night the previous evening. She had changed the rules overnight and then cited everyone the next morning. I felt my blood pressure spike. I spent the rest of the day gathering information. I reached out to a local journalist contact I knew from a community forum, someone who covered HOA disputes and local governance issues. Her name was Elena, and she had a reputation for cutting through nonsense. I explained the situation and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one thing: get everything in writing. Every rule change, every notice, every conversation. If she is making this up as she goes, you need proof that shows the timeline. I thanked her and hung up, then started building a file. I printed the original community rules from the portal. I saved the group chat screenshot. I took photos of the violation notice front and back. I requested a copy of my lease addendum from the rental office, which confirmed that my parking was tied to my unit and that there was no mention of guest parking restrictions or permit requirements. I was putting together a paper trail, and I was doing it fast because I knew Carol was not going to stop. That night I parked in my assigned spot, not the guest lot, and I made sure to photograph the space number and the timestamp. I went inside, made dinner, and tried to relax. But around 9 I heard voices outside. I looked out my window and saw Carol standing by my car with a maintenance worker in a reflective vest. The worker was holding a clipboard in a clear plastic sleeve, and Carol was pointing at my vehicle, gesturing wildly. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my white visor and headed outside. By the time I got there, Carol was on her phone, the flashlight still in her other hand, shining it at my license plate like she was conducting an investigation. The maintenance worker looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly wanting no part of this. "What is going on?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Carol spun around, her bucket hat nearly flying off. "You are parked in a fire lane," she said, her voice sharp. "This spot is restricted after 8 and you are in violation." I looked at the pavement. There was no red curb, no fire lane stencil, no signage. I pointed this out and Carol waved her hand dismissively. "The restriction is in the updated handbook," she said. "Ignorance is not an excuse. If you make me repeat myself, it gets more expensive." I felt the anger rising, but I pushed it down. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Carol noticed immediately and her expression shifted, just for a second, from smug to uncertain. Then she recovered. "You cannot record me without my consent," she said. I smiled, tight and cold. "Delaware is a one-party consent state," I said. "I can record any conversation I am part of. And right now, you are claiming I am in a fire lane with no visible markings, no posted signs, and no advance notice. So either show me the rule or stop harassing me." The maintenance worker took a step back, clearly done with this. Carol glared at me, her jaw working like she was chewing on a response. Then she turned and walked away, muttering something about filing a formal complaint. The maintenance worker gave me an apologetic shrug and followed her. I stood there, phone still recording, watching them disappear into the darkness. My heart was pounding, but I felt something else too. Control. I was building my case and Carol did not even realize it. The next day, I got another notice. This one was different. It claimed I had damaged common property and must pay immediately or be charged daily. The alleged damage was a crack in the curb near my parking spot, something I had never seen before, and definitely had not caused. The notice demanded $300 within 72 hours or the fee would increase by $50 per day. I took photos of the curb from every angle. The crack was old, weathered, with grass growing through it. It had been there long before I moved in. I sent the photos to Elena and she replied within an hour. "This is retaliation. Document everything and file a complaint with the management company. Demand an inspection report showing when the damage occurred. If they cannot provide one, they cannot prove you caused it." I drafted an email to the management company, attaching the photos, the notice, and a request for the inspection report. I kept the tone professional, factual, no emotion. I sent it and waited. 2 hours later, I got a reply from the property manager, a guy named Derek who sounded exhausted even in writing. He said he would look into it and get back to me. I did not hold my breath. That afternoon, Carol escalated. I was at work when I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and a woman identified herself as an officer with the Newark Police Department. She said she had received a complaint about a dispute in the villas at Lakeview Community Association, and she wanted to get my side of the story. I explained the situation, keeping it short and factual. The officer listened, asked a few clarifying questions, then said something that made my stomach drop. "The caller claimed you were trespassing and threatening her." I felt the anger flare, but I kept my voice steady. "That is not true," I said. "I have recordings of the interactions and witnesses. The caller is the HOA vice chair, and she has been harassing me over parking rules that do not exist." The officer paused, then said she would need to review the complaint, and that I should avoid contact with the caller for now. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. Carol had tried to weaponize the police, and it had backfired because the officer had done her job and asked for my side. But it was a warning shot. Carol was willing to lie to escalate this, and I needed to be ready for anything. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what Elena had said. Get everything in writing. Prove the timeline. I pulled out my laptop and started building a document. I listed every interaction with Carol, every notice, every rule change, every threat. I included timestamps, photos, screenshots, and witness names. The maintenance worker had seen the fire lane confrontation. Elena had the group chat screenshot. Derek at the management company had my email trail. I was building a case, and it was solid. But I needed something more. I needed proof that Carol was not just abusing her authority but profiting from it. And then I remembered something. The handheld scanner. Carol carried it everywhere, brandished it like a weapon, used it to scan plates and check registrations. But scanners like that kept logs. They recorded every scan, every search, every action. If I could get access to that log, I could prove she was targeting me and others without cause. I reached out to Elena again and explained my theory. She replied fast. "That is good. But you need a legal way to get it. File a records request with the HOA. They are required to provide meeting minutes, financial records, and enforcement logs. If Carol is using HOA equipment, those scans are HOA records." I drafted the request that night and sent it the next morning. I asked for all parking enforcement records for the past 6 months, all rule change announcements, and all meeting minutes related to parking policy. I sent it to Derek and copied the HOA board president. Then I waited. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe, because HOA drama never stops, and I have more stories coming. The response came 3 days later. Derek forwarded me a packet of documents including meeting minutes from the past year and a partial log of parking violations. But the enforcement log was incomplete. It only covered the past 2 months, and it was missing entire weeks. I read through it and noticed something strange. Every violation in the log was issued by Carol. Every single one. No other board members. No property manager. Just Carol. And the violations followed a pattern. They targeted the same people over and over, often for minor infractions that escalated into tow threats within days. One resident had been cited 5 times in 3 weeks for the same parking spot. Another had been threatened with a boot after a single overnight guest visit. The log was a record of harassment, and it had Carol's name all over it. But it was not enough. I needed the full log, and I needed proof that the rules she was citing did not exist when she claimed they did. I called Elena, and she walked me through the next steps. File a formal complaint with the board. Attend the next meeting. Bring your evidence and make them address it on the record. If they refuse, you escalate to the state HOA oversight board or small claims court. I thanked her and started drafting the complaint. I kept it factual, detailed, and cold. I listed every violation notice, every rule change, every threat. I attached the incomplete log, the photos, the recordings, and the timeline. I submitted it to the board and requested a hearing at the next meeting. Then I prepared for war. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening. I showed up 15 minutes early, carrying a folder with my evidence and my phone set to record. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a bland room with folding chairs and a long table at the front where the board members sat. Carol was already there, sitting at the far end of the table, her bucket hat perched on her head, her handheld scanner sitting in front of her like a prop. She saw me walk in and her expression hardened. I took a seat in the back row, next to a couple of other residents who looked just as angry as I felt. The board president, a tired-looking man named Gary, called the meeting to order and started with the usual agenda items. Budget updates, landscaping bids, pool maintenance. I waited, my folder open on my lap, my phone recording in my pocket. When Gary finally got to new business, I raised my hand. He looked at me, then at Carol, then sighed. "You have a complaint?" he asked. "I do," I said, standing up. I walked to the front and handed him a copy of my complaint packet. "I have been targeted by the Design Review Board Vice Chair with false violations, fabricated rules, and threats of towing and daily fees. I have documentation showing that the rules being cited do not exist in the community handbook, that notices were issued without advance warning, and that the parking enforcement log shows a pattern of harassment targeting specific residents. I request a formal investigation and a suspension of all pending violations until this is resolved." Gary flipped through the packet, his face unreadable. Carol leaned forward, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Every violation was legitimate and every rule is documented. If you do not like the rules, you can move." I turned to her, my voice calm. "Then show me the rule," I said. "Show me where it says guest parking requires a permit. Show me where it says my assigned spot becomes a fire lane after 8. Show me the meeting minutes where these rules were voted on and approved." Carol opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand moved to the tiny body camera clipped to her blazer, a nervous gesture. Gary cleared his throat. "We will review the complaint and provide a response within 2 weeks," he said. "In the meantime, all pending violations are suspended." Carol stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is unacceptable," she said. "The board will back me because they are afraid of me." The room went silent. Gary stared at her, his expression shifting from tired to angry. "That is not how this works," he said. "Sit down." Carol glared at him, then grabbed her scanner and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I sat back down, my heart pounding. I let her talk, because every word was helping me. After the meeting, 3 residents approached me. One of them, a woman named Sarah, said she had been dealing with Carol for months. She had been cited for guest parking violations even though her guests always left within the allowed window. Another resident, an older man named Tom, said Carol had threatened to boot his car after he questioned a fine. They all wanted to know what I was doing and how they could help. I told them about the records request, the complaint, and the timeline I was building. Sarah said she had emails from Carol that contradicted the rules Carol was now citing. Tom said he had photos of his car being marked with chalk in the middle of the night, long before the alleged overnight violation window. We exchanged numbers and I added their evidence to my file. I was not alone anymore. This was bigger than me. Carol had been abusing her authority for months and people were ready to fight back. That night I got an email from Elena. She had been doing some digging and she had found something. Carol Walker was listed as the primary contact for the HOA's towing vendor, a company called Metro Tow. The contract was public record, and it included a referral clause. For every vehicle towed, the referring party received a percentage of the fee. Elena attached a screenshot of the contract. I stared at it, my mind racing. Carol was getting paid every time she called for a tow. That was why she was so aggressive. That was why she was making up rules. She had a financial incentive to escalate every violation into a tow. This was the trump card I needed. But I could not reveal it yet. I needed to confirm it, verify it, and deploy it at the right moment. I let her talk, because every word was helping me. The next morning I drove to the management company office. It was a small building in a strip mall, bland and forgettable. I walked in and asked to speak to Derek. The receptionist looked at me like I was there to complain about a broken dishwasher, then buzzed him. Derek came out a few minutes later, looking even more exhausted in person than he sounded in emails. We sat down in a small conference room and I laid out everything. The timeline, the false violations, the contract, the referral fee. Derek listened, his face growing more and more grim. When I finished, he sat back and rubbed his eyes. "I did not know about the referral clause," he said. "That is a conflict of interest and it should never have been approved. But I need you to understand something. Carol has been with this HOA for 5 years and she has a lot of influence. If you go after her, she is going to fight back hard." "I know," I said. "That is why I need you to confirm the contract on camera. I need a statement from the management company that the referral clause exists and that it was never disclosed to residents." Derek hesitated, then nodded. "I can do that," he said. "But you have to promise me this stays professional. No threats, no harassment, no retaliation." I agreed and we set up a time to record the statement. I left the office feeling like I had just armed a bomb. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment to detonate it. 2 days later, I got another notice. This time, it was a boot threat. The notice claimed my vehicle had been parked in the same spot for more than 72 hours, violating a rule about long-term parking in guest zones. But I was not parked in a guest zone. I was in my assigned spot, the same spot I had been in for weeks. I took photos, checked the date stamps and added the notice to my file. Then I called Sarah and Tom. They both confirmed they had received similar notices in the past week. Carol was ramping up. She knew something was coming and she was trying to bury us in violations before we could fight back. But she had made a mistake. The boot threat notice included a reference to Section 18.9 of the community rules. I pulled up the rulebook and checked. Section 18.9 did not exist. The rulebook only went to Section 15. Carol had cited a fake rule. I forwarded the notice to Elena and she replied immediately. "That is falsification. If she is inventing rules, you can take this to small claims court and argue fraud. But you need to act fast. If she actually boots your car, you will have to pay to get it removed and then fight for a refund." I was not going to let it get that far. I printed the rulebook, highlighted the section numbers, and prepared to confront Carol directly. But before I could, something else happened. A board member reached out to me. His name was Kevin, and he was the treasurer. He said he needed to talk and it was urgent. We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Kevin looked nervous, glancing around like he was worried about being seen. He slid a thumb drive across the table. "This is a recording from Carol's body camera," he said quietly. "She forgot to turn it off after the meeting last week and it kept recording. She was talking to the tow vendor on the phone. She was bragging about how much money she had made from referrals and how she was planning to ramp up enforcement to hit a quota before the end of the quarter." I stared at the thumb drive, my heart pounding. This was it. This was the trump card. Kevin continued. "I cannot be the one to release it," he said. "If Carol finds out I gave this to you, she will destroy me. But you can use it. You can take her down." I took the thumb drive and thanked him. He left without finishing his coffee. I went home, plugged in the drive, and listened to the recording. Carol's voice was clear, smug, and incriminating. She talked about targeting specific residents, about ignoring appeals, about making sure the town numbers stayed high. She even joked about scaring people into paying fines rather than fighting them. It was everything I needed. But I still could not release it yet. I needed the right moment, the right audience, and the right impact. I was going to deploy this at the showdown and it was going to be devastating. The next confrontation came faster than I expected. I was leaving for work one morning when I found a tire clamp on my car. It was a bright yellow wheel immobilizer, locked tight around my front driver's side tire. There was a notice stuck to my windshield with the tow vendor's number and a demand for $200 to remove the clamp. I took photos from every angle, then called the number. A bored-sounding dispatcher answered and I explained the situation. She said the clamp had been authorized by the HOA and that I needed to pay the fee before they would remove it. I asked for proof of the authorization, and she said it was on file but she could not send it to me. I told her I would be filing a dispute and hung up. Then I called Elena. She told me to document everything, call the police non-emergency line to report the clamp as potentially unauthorized, and prepare to file in small claims court if they did not remove it within 24 hours. I did all of that, then called Derek at the management company. He sounded panicked. I did not authorize this, he said. This is Carol acting on her own. I will call Metro Tow and get it removed. 2 hours later, a tow truck showed up and a worker removed the clamp. He did not say a word, just unlocked it, loaded it into his truck, and drove away. I was late to work again. My supervisor pulled me aside and gave me a warning. One more time and I was done. I explained the situation and he listened, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He thought I was making excuses. I left his office feeling like the walls were closing in. Carol was not just costing me money and time. She was threatening my job, my stability, my future. I could not let this go on. That night I drafted a formal legal demand. I listed every violation, every false notice, every threat, and every cost I had incurred. I demanded a full refund, a public apology, and an immediate suspension of Carol from all enforcement duties. I sent it to the board, the management company, and Carol directly. Then I prepared for the next phase. The showdown was coming and it was going to happen in a courthouse hallway right before a hearing on a workday. I had filed a small claims case against the HOA and Carol personally, arguing fraud, harassment, and abuse of authority. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I took the day off work, using the last of my personal time, and prepared my evidence. I printed everything. The timeline, the photos, the recordings, the contract, the body camera recording. I organized it into a binder with tabs and annotations. I rehearsed my statement, keeping it calm, factual, and devastating. Elena agreed to come as a witness and to help me navigate the process. Sarah and Tom also agreed to come and provide statements about their own experiences with Carol. We were ready. The morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. The hallway was crowded with people waiting for other cases, lawyers conferring with clients, clerks shuttling paperwork. I found a bench near the courtroom door and sat down. My binder on my lap, my phone recording in my pocket. Elena arrived a few minutes later, followed by Sarah and Tom. We went over the plan one more time. I would present my case first, then call Elena and the others as witnesses. I would play the body camera recording at the end, after Carol had a chance to testify. I wanted her to commit to her lies before I destroyed them. At 9:55, Carol arrived. She was wearing her pink blazer, her bucket hat, and her body camera. She had a lawyer with her, a sharp-looking woman in a gray suit who looked like she did not want to be there. Carol saw me and her expression twisted into something between rage and panic. She walked past without saying a word, her lawyer following close behind. At 10, the clerk called our case. We filed into the courtroom, a small room with wood paneling and a judge's bench at the front. The judge was a middle-aged man with reading glasses and a skeptical expression. He reviewed the case summary, then looked at me. "You are representing yourself?" he asked. "I am," I said. He nodded. "Proceed." I stood up and presented my case. I walked through the timeline, showing how Carol had targeted me with false violations, fabricated rules, and threats of towing and daily fees. I presented the incomplete enforcement log, showing the pattern of harassment. I presented the contract with the referral clause, showing Carol's financial incentive. I played excerpts from my recordings, including Carol's threat to call the police and her admission that the board was afraid of her. The judge listened, taking notes, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he looked at Carol. "Do you want to respond?" he asked. Carol stood up, her lawyer beside her. "This is all lies," she said, her voice shaking. "Every violation was legitimate. Every rule is in the handbook. This man is a troublemaker who refuses to follow the rules, and now he is trying to smear me because he got caught." The judge looked at her lawyer. "Do you have evidence to support that?" he asked. The lawyer hesitated, then pulled out a folder. She presented a copy of the community rulebook, but it was the old version, the one from 3 years ago. The judge flipped through it and frowned. "This does not match the version the plaintiff provided," he said. "Which one is current?" The lawyer looked at Carol. Carol opened her mouth, then closed it. The judge waited. Carol fumbled for an answer. "The rules were updated," she said. "The new version was distributed to all residents." The judge looked at me. "Did you receive an updated rulebook?" he asked. "No," I said. "The only version I have is the one from the community portal, which I printed and included in my evidence." The judge looked back at Carol. "If the rules were updated, where are the meeting minutes showing the vote?" he asked. Carol did not answer. The judge sighed. "I am going to need to see documentation of all rule changes, including meeting minutes, resident notifications, and board approvals. If you cannot provide that, I am inclined to rule in favor of the plaintiff." That was when I played the trump card. "Your Honor," I said, standing up. "I have one more piece of evidence." I pulled out my phone and played the body camera recording. Carol's voice filled the courtroom, bragging about referral fees, targeting residents, hitting quotas. The room went silent. Carol's face went white. Her lawyer looked at her, then looked at the judge, then quietly closed her folder. The judge listened to the entire recording, then looked at Carol. "Do you want to explain this?" he asked. Carol did not say anything. She just stood there, shaking, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The judge made his ruling. He found in my favor on all counts. He ordered the HOA to refund all fees, suspend all pending violations, and adopt a clear parking and towing policy with a neutral appeal process and proof standards. He also ordered Carol to be placed on a no-contact directive by management, prohibiting her from any enforcement actions against me or any other resident without board approval. He ended by saying that if there was any evidence of continued retaliation, he would consider sanctions. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I had just won a war. Elena hugged me. Sarah and Tom shook my hand. We stood in the hallway watching Carol and her lawyer walk away in silence. But it was not over yet. 2 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency meeting. The agenda included a vote on Carol's future with the board. Sarah, Tom, and I attended, along with a dozen other residents who had been targeted by Carol over the past year. We brought our evidence, and we brought a neighbor petition that forces a vote during the meeting. The petition had 37 signatures, more than enough to trigger a recall vote under the HOA bylaws. Gary, the board president, called the meeting to order and addressed the situation. He said the board had reviewed the court ruling, the evidence, and the complaints from multiple residents. He said the board was committed to transparency and fairness and that they took the allegations seriously. Then he called for the vote. Carol was not present. She had resigned from the design review board the day after the hearing. But the vote was not about removing her. It was about adopting new policies to prevent this from ever happening again. The board voted unanimously to adopt a clear parking and towing policy with a neutral appeal process and proof standards. They also voted to terminate the contract with MetroTow and to prohibit any board member from having a financial relationship with any vendor. The meeting ended with applause. I left feeling like we had actually changed something. It was not just about me anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what I went through. A month later, I got an email from Derek at the management company. He said the HOA had finalized the new parking policy and that it was now posted on the community portal and distributed to all residents. He also said the HOA had agreed to pay my filing fees to end the fight, covering the cost of the small claims case and the records requests. I accepted the settlement and closed the case. Carol never came back. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved out shortly after the meeting, selling her unit and leaving the state. I did not feel bad for her. She had abused her power, targeted innocent people and profited from their misery. She got exactly what she deserved. As for me, I kept my job, my parking spot, and my peace of mind. I still live in the villas at Lakeview Community Association, and I still hate chaos. But now, when I see a violation notice or a tow threat, I know exactly what to do. I document everything, I build my case, and I fight back. Because the one thing I learned from all of this is that HOAs only have the power you give them, and I am never giving them power over me again. One last thing happened that made the whole ordeal worth it. About 2 months after everything settled, I was walking to my car when I saw Carol's old handheld scanner sitting in a trash bin near the management office. Someone had tossed it, probably after the new policy banned personal enforcement equipment. I stopped and looked at it for a second, remembering how she used to wave it around like a weapon, how she used to scan plates and act like she had authority over everyone. And then I remembered the funny karma moment that had happened during the second set piece, the permit scan chaos scene where her scanner had betrayed her. It was during the week after the boot incident, before the hearing. Carol had cornered another resident in the parking lot, a young woman named Jess, who had just moved in. Carol was demanding to see her guest pass and waving her handheld scanner around, trying to scan the VIN through the windshield. But the scanner was acting up. It kept beeping error codes, refusing to read the number. Carol got more and more flustered, shaking the device, hitting buttons, muttering under her breath. Jess just stood there, arms crossed, watching Carol spiral. Then a delivery driver pulled up, saw what was happening, and started laughing. He said, "That thing does not even work for what you are trying to do. It is just a barcode scanner. You cannot scan VINs with it." Carol turned red, stammered something about it being a specialized model, and then her handheld scanner slipped from her hand and skittered across the pavement, the battery cover popping off and the batteries rolling under a car. Jess laughed. The delivery driver laughed. Even the maintenance worker in the reflective vest, who had been watching silently from across the lot, cracked a smile. Carol scrambled to pick up the pieces, her face burning, and then she just walked away without another word. It was the beginning of the end for her, and everyone knew it. I smiled at the memory, left the scanner in the trash where it belonged, and went home. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.